So, and Stephanie is very big in the disability community nationally. And she's brought a lot of opportunities to me. And she's just an awesome, super advocate. And she actually is gonna be on Capitol Hill for a fellowship, starting in September for a year. So she's our person on Capitol Hill now to try and, I don't know what you can do for us, but as much as she can. So Stephanie is a development director and supervisor of Letter K's National Center for Prenatal and Postnatal Resources at the nonprofit Genetic Support Foundation. She also works as a Len family faculty at the University of Kentucky. She's the author of multiple nationally recommended resources about genetic conditions for new and expectant parents. One of them is ours, which I have copies of that we can all take to, if anyone sees any genetics clinics, you can take those. Now I lost my spot. She publishes research on diagnostic experiences and support strategies for patients learning about prenatal diagnoses. She's been offering support for new and expectant parents and training for doctors on how to sensibly deliver diagnoses for nearly 20 years, and she has a doctorate in public health with a focus on disability and health policy. Most importantly, she manages to juggle these responsibilities as the world's okayest mom to Andy Meredith, a young man with Down syndrome, and her two younger daughters. All right, Stephanie, go ahead.
So, okay, I think I might be too close. Thanks, Curtis. All right, so, usually when I go to conferences, I end up talking about genetics or, talking to doctors about delivering a diagnosis. So it's really fun to talk about my most favorite topic, which is Andy, and how I'm a pretty mediocre mom, but we've still managed to survive. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, and I'm very excited about it. So this is Andy, and this is our whole family. He's my oldest. I had Andy when I was 23 years old, and he was kind of a surprise postnatal diagnosis about 4 hours after he was born. They said he has, this and this and this characteristics of Down syndrome. And, at 23 years old, that was a surprise to us, but, and also overwhelming. And we had a lot of concerns when he was first born that we had to adjust to. And some of those concerns were, you hear about, how am I going to afford speech therapy? How are we going to get all of this stuff done? I'm 23 years old. I just barely graduated from college, just started my first job. How are we going to do all of those things? And then they tell you about early intervention and they give you all of those great resources. And you think, I'm going to do everything. Everything they've asked me to do, I'm going to do it all because I want him to have the best possible outcomes and it's going to be amazing. Okay. But what I learned pretty shortly after that is that our kids are not soda machines. Just because we put the dollar in does not mean we're necessarily going to get the Sprite out. Because, we can do all the therapies in the world. We can do all of the, and this is for any of our kids, all of the education, all of the things, and they're still going to make their own choices and be their own person. And so a lot of the things we do are going to help them develop into who they want to be and who we envision for them. But they're still they're just going to kind of still do their own thing. And I think it's important to realize that even though we're putting all of that in, it doesn't mean that we're going to get the Sprite out. We might get a pineapple Fanta, and it's going to be delicious too. And it's okay. And we love who ends up coming out. But just to give ourselves grace in that. You can be doing all the things, and your kid is still going to be who they are, right? We did all of the reading interventions. We tried a ton of different things, and Andy still struggles with reading. And that's okay, because we all do our job. Sorry, got people buzzing me. And I think the other thing that kind of surprised me, I don't know if did anyone tell you that special kids come to special parents? Yeah. You guys get that? Yeah, I got that a lot. And as a 23-year-old, it kind of gave me a big head at first. I'm like, well, okay, I guess I am special. I'm up for this task. And then all of a sudden you realize, you know what? I actually kind of do struggle with some things, and why am I not quite as special as people make me feel like I am? And sometimes we get hard on ourselves. And so that's also what I'm kind of talking about. 'Cause one of the reasons I came up with this talk in the first place is I do a lot of support of new and expectant parents. And a lot of times they are still in that phase of trying to do all of the things and be perfect. And then being really hard on themselves when inevitably it doesn't work for anybody. None of us can be perfect and do all of the things all the time. And so I'm here to tell you that you can be a slapper parent sometimes and still have things work out okay. And actually, sometimes our kids even learn from us when we mess up. And so this is actually a really great story. One day, and I don't recommend regularly losing your kid. It's not the best, but it happens every now and then to all of us. Well, we were on the beach one time with my whole family, and I don't know if anybody else is like this, but when our whole family is together, sometimes you think one person's watching the kid, and then somebody else thinks the other person's watching the kid, and all of a sudden you realize, okay, where's the kid? And we did that, and it was terrifying because it was at the beach. And so we were like, oh my gosh, there's water, you know, couldn't see him. It hadn't been very long, but then all of a sudden he rides up with this girl. And so what he learned in our moment of screwing up was how to find someone else for help, and someone who was far more attractive than his parents. So just because we mess up every now and then doesn't mean that our kids, you know, sometimes our kids learn from that. And there have been other times, there was one time we were going dress shopping, and fortunately I'm past that point where someone could report me for all of this, for these times I've lost him, but we were dress shopping with my girls. He ends up kind of, again, disappearing. This is at about 16, he already had a phone at this point. And we ended up texting him, where are you? And he sent us a picture of the menu. He had gone like next door to the other store. And that was a great problem solving skill. He couldn't tell us the name of the restaurant, but he took a picture of the menu. Well, that's pretty resourceful. So I'm just saying, sometimes when we screw up, our kids learn to be resourceful, and it's okay. And here's the other thing, I think too, when people give that special kids come to special parents, you know, kind of maxim that they talk about, it assumes that our kids are perfect. And our kids aren't perfect either. And that's okay. I actually really like that Andy is a regular, ordinary human who has, you know, great days, but he also has days that aren't so great because he feels for other people. He feels empathy. You know, so there are days when he's sad, when he recognizes his friends are sad. And there are days when he's ornery, but sometimes it's super funny. And I'm going to tell you an example of that. So look, I don't know if you can tell closely on this picture, but I had it one time. I got into it with a guy at a restaurant. He said, kids at Down syndrome are sweet all the time. I said, well, he's just an ordinary kid. And he goes, but he's extra sweet. I was like, no, really, like he is just a regular kid. And this guy seems really insistent. And it reminded me of this picture, because I don't know if you can look closely enough, but he looks like he's hugging his sister, right? But do you see what he's doing with his fingers? Yeah, he's giving her the loser sign. So he's being sweet, but he's giving her the loser sign. And that's the thing, I actually love his sarcasm. So I'll tell you a great story where he showed his very human sarcasm with me. He goes, Mom, you have a belly like Santa Claus. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so rude. And I was like, well, you're going bald like your dad. He goes, you also have a beard like Santa Claus. And I was like, that dug deep to my deepest insecurity. But that's the thing, like, I love that he's not perfect and that he's human and ordinary and wonderful. I think too, that sometimes when we're at conferences, sometimes you see kids who are, you know, maybe highlighted, who are the superstars and that's maybe how people perceive them. But kids with disabilities don't have to be superstars to be amazing, because all of our kids have their own unique strengths and challenges. And it's our job to kind of find what they are and to highlight what the strengths are. And like in Andy's case, you know, he still struggles with math. He's counting consistently to 10 and Even, his reading is probably now at a, maybe a second, third grade level, but he's really great at photography. And that's something where even though he struggles with those other things, that's something that he can develop confidence about. He's building a career on. And so just because our kids struggle in some areas doesn't mean that they aren't going to excel in others. He also is, he's very friendly and he likes to have friends. So there are ways in which our kids don't have, and I don't think most of us aren't superstars. We are just the unique combination of strengths and challenges that each of us have. And so it's more of discovering what gives us pride in ourselves and brings happiness. And I think overall, remembering what really matters and what really makes us happy: kindness, generosity, courage, fun, adventure, and beauty. And I had a really great question at a conference one time where they asked, what's something you're proud of about Andy that has nothing to do with a milestone? Because I think, again, sometimes we get caught up in milestones that we've got to help them reach that next thing, right? But with this question, it actually came to my mind really fast. And it was a time when my youngest daughter was on the basketball court. And she was running really fast and ended up running headlong into another girl. You could hear the crash, and then she hit the floor and her head hit hard. And I think everybody, the room kind of collectively gasped when it happened. And before any adult could do anything, he just kind of jumped over two bleachers and he ran and he scooped her up. And to me, that was actually the moment when I was the most proud of him. And it had nothing to do with an accomplishment or a milestone, but it was the raw humanity and compassion of caring for his sister like that. And that's something that isn't measured in any test or chart, but it's really the heart of humanity and what really matters. So when we maybe start feeling down about if they're not meeting a milestone or they're not doing this or that, and looking for those moments that genuinely get to the heart of who they are. The other thing I think it's important to remember as we're raising our kids, and this was a piece of advice that I got from a friend of mine who's a sibling and has two, a brother and a sister actually with Down syndrome. And she said, one thing that was really important for my parents was to make sure that our brother with Down syndrome was one of the spokes and not the hub of the wheel in our family. And I think sometimes that, kids will take turns being that hub if there's a medical emergency or things like that. But I really took that to heart when she said it. And so some of the ways that I tried to work on that also took work off me, because I tried to make sure that insofar as Andy could, that we gave him chores, just like his sisters. Now his chores had to be simplified. And like Jessica said, we had to have the chore charts with him and then the guys. So maybe, he was raking the leaves and they were having to do dusting, vacuum, those sorts of things. But we wanted them to see that he also had to do work around the house to help me, because he was doing some of the raking. And actually, it did provide some really great memories, because Andy, we also needed to do other things, and sometimes during the week. So during the summer, I would lead our camp for church. And so if someone is one of the spokes on the wheel, you have to find them something else to do, because you're not able to focus all your attention on them. So one of the things we did, Andy was really interested in horses at the time, and he was too old for going to the horse riding camp at YMCA. So we asked if he could be one of the helpers. And they did have that, and one of the counselors. So we call it horse poop scooping camp, because basically he got to go and he got to take care of the horses, help with the chores and the poop scooping there. And then while the other kids were running, he loved it. He loved it. We had to buy boots. Yeah, I mean, it's important to give them those opportunities to be away from us too. And another way that we do that, where he's not always the hub, is that, yeah, sometimes we're going to National Down syndrome conferences, like this, and we're focused on them. But I also try to take sometimes time with my other kids that's separate from him, because they, we all need that individualized time with each other. And so I think that's another key to helping you too, to be able to connect with the other kids and also to have some time just to rejuvenate. So I thought that was a piece of good advice that really has helped me along the way. And then the other thing about being a mediocre parent is you cannot do everything. None of us can. And so kind of picking your battles and what you're up for at a certain time. For me, inclusion and community were my priorities. I went into our first IEP meeting, and I had gone to the National Down Syndrome Conference. I was like, we're gonna make sure he's included as much as possible. I mean, he still got pulled out for about half the day, but we really, really wanted him to be involved in specials. And so that was the battle that I decided to pick when he was little. But that might not be your battle. It might be, we're really gonna work on behavior. We're really gonna work on reading. I have a friend whose son with Down syndrome struggles a lot with behavior, but he is an amazing reader. And so we kind of have to pick what we can do in the moment and realize we can't do everything. And not beat ourselves up about it. So like back then when Andy was little, I couldn't do a lot of policy work. I was tired. I was just trying to make sure you're putting out fires. We're trying to do the day-to-day. I couldn't do a lot of policy stuff then, but now that he's older and we have a Medicaid waiver and he's got support staff, now's the season in my life when I can do that. So don't beat yourself up when you can't do all the things all the time, because there are different seasons for different things. And there are also different ones of us that are able to do things at different times. And we have different strengths. And that's okay, because as a community, we also balance each other out. So maybe I can go do this year, but maybe you're also running, specifically at your school, doing something that's important, or just with your child, something that's important right now. All of it matters. And then also give yourself grace when things fall apart. This is actually a picture of my literal kitchen when I came home from that trip to New York with my daughter. That's what it looked like. It was bad. And that's the thing, is as you're doing some things, life is a seesaw, right? When you might be excelling at something else is falling apart. And so it doesn't do it. So when that happens, give yourself grace. It's like, okay, so yeah, my kitchen's a disaster, but you know what? I did this other thing this week and that was my priority, and that's how it's gonna be. And I think too, sometimes we compare ourselves to others, and it's really important not to do that, because if you think someone else has everything together, you just don't know them well enough. That's the straight up truth, because everybody is seesawing in life. Some ways they're excelling, some ways they're struggling. And give yourself infinite do-overs. And I'll tell you, this actually happened to me last night. So I had this dream of this past week. So I went to the Little People of America conference earlier this week, and then was here today. And I thought, I'm gonna bring my exercise clothes and I'm gonna go down to the gym in the hotel in the morning, and I'm gonna make it happen. And you know what? How many times I've done it this past week? 2. I have not gotten home one time. Well, not one time, but, and like last night, I got in and I was so tired. And I thought, I'm gonna go to bed. And I had these aspirations of going to bed early and waking up and doing this exercise. But instead, I watched a YouTube video of the guy who played Biff Tannen talk about his time doing Back to the Future. I stayed up from about 11:30 to 12 doing that. But you know what? I needed that to kind of calm myself down yesterday. And so my do-over is, yeah, I made that. I did that today. I did that last night and today. But tomorrow, I really am going to do over, because I'm going to be back home in my regular environment. And I really will go for my run walk in the morning. When I say that, it's more of a walk than a run, but I'm going to do it. And we get to give ourselves infinite do-overs to do better and to do, and I'm not even going to say do better. Like, I needed to be able to decompress last night, and that's okay. And ultimately, you're going to get so many ideas from this conference. As a matter of fact, I was taking so many during Jessica's, I was like, oh, we got to make a visual reminder for the shower, and we need to make a visual reminder for, each day I want to send him a text agenda with little emojis telling him what we're going to do, different hours. Maybe he'll get better at time management. And maybe we'll end up doing 1% better. We're not going to be able to end up doing all the things probably, but even if we do a few of the things, we're going to get a little bit better. And that's okay. And it's going to be on average too, because there are going to be some days when we fall 10% down. And then there are going to be other days when we go 15% up, and it's going to average out over time. The fact that you're here means we're trying to at least get some of those ideas. So give yourself grace when it falls apart, because it will, and then let yourself do over. And like I said, it's okay to take time for yourself, even if it's just watching girls for half an hour. I think sometimes people talk about self-care, especially as parents of kids with disabilities. We're like, that's a funny thing. Self-care, when am I going to do that? But I think sometimes it manifests itself in different ways for each of us. And it's important to allow ourselves to do that. Because I was kind of beating myself up last night about watching the reels over and over again. And I was like, why? That was my way of taking some self-care and some time for myself. I needed that. It's okay. I mean, I don't want to do it all the time in sacrificing exercise, but sometimes it's needed. Sometimes it's being alone. Sometimes it's being with friends. Sometimes it's vacation. Sometimes it's staying home and doing nothing. And not feeling bad about it. Sometimes it's reading, watching TV. There are lots of different ways that we need to take time for ourselves. I know Lindsay's really good at pottery, it's like taking time for talents, going out to dinner and exercise. Those can all be some ways we can rejuvenate ourselves. And that's really important too. And I think also being willing to change course when we realize something might not be working or might not be what we envisioned. And my example here is we had always thought we have this post-secondary program near us that people with disabilities sometimes go to at Kennesaw State University. And I thought, oh, that's our dream. That's what we're going to do. And Andy went to the camp to prepare for that. And we thought this would be a great option. But then as we looked into it and we got to that age, we were like, wow, it's really expensive, first of all. It's more outside of our budget that we can afford. But then also, he just wasn't in a place where going and moving away from home was the best option for him. And so what we ended up finding was we called around, we found that the little local college that I used to teach at, I said, can we just go there and audit some classes? And in areas that he's interested in, like we did public speaking, and we did some photography class, things like that. He said, absolutely. And we didn't think that was even an option. So kind of exploring and finding out what's available and being willing to change course. And at first I was really disappointed because it was my husband who was like, Stephanie, you can't afford to do that. And I was just like, you're killing my dream. But then, we kind of recalibrated and we looked at this other option, and it ended up being even better because a lot of his friends from high school also went to that college, and he was able to get the meal plan and eat dinner with or eat lunch with them and take these classes. And we had this bus in our town that would take people with disabilities where they need to go, and the bus would pick him up, take him right to school, and drop him off. And he couldn't have done that at the other program. So it ended up being even better, but I had to be willing to let go of what my initial dream had been. And it turned out fine. Sometimes it's okay to keep up on your dreams. No, just kidding. No. Because it ended up being even better. I think too, and another kind of impetus for writing this talk was a lot of these moms that I was supporting online, they were being really hard on themselves, but also they were trying to get their kids into ballet or whatever, and they were asking ahead of time, will you let my child in? And a lot of times they were being told no. And I realized that at 23 years old, I was kind of ignorant and naive. And so I didn't ever ask. I just signed Andy up. And then I did set up supports where they were needed and stuff, but I didn't ask permission. And I realized that I think that really served us well, because then the onus of responsibility to embarrass themselves is on the person who says no, if they say no. Because it's like, then they have to give that reason. So we kind of just assumed he would belong, and we signed him up for stuff, and we did work out the supports and accommodations. But I think that helped too, because then we had a lot more options of places to go, because we didn't let them kind of tell us no in the beginning. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not heartbreak along the way. And I will tell you, one of them, we signed him up for a swim class with his sister. And it was at the YMCA, and we were so excited for them to learn to swim together. And as we were in the class, the teacher said, well, have you thought about signing up for Special Olympics? I was like, well, I have a lot of respect for Special Olympics, love Special Olympics, but we wanted him to take the class with his sister. So that's not how we did it. And she said, oh, okay. But then she kind of kept asking about that. And then about a week in, after he tried to cooperate with pretty much everything she said, she's like, well, if I tell him to do something differently, is he gonna hit me? I was like, no, but I might right now. But yeah, no, she was so resistant to having him in her class, and it was heartbreaking. I mean, it kind of kills your mama heart when someone does something like that, right? And I think that's why we asked for permission, because we don't want that rejection after we've already done it. But I think we sometimes still end up finding unexpected cheerleaders. And so that happened I guess it was a couple of months after. He finally had learned how to ride a bike. We were going to do the Lose the Training Wheels camp. And he had been riding with training wheels till they kind of bent out because he got so heavy for the bike. And so but he finally picked it up and thought, okay, we're gonna check out this new mountain bike team that's near our house. And this lady, Coach Stephanie, she was one of those people who was the opposite of that swim coach. So she took him, and it took him 40 minutes to go around just a 1 mile loop. Took a long time. And this was after he was 12 and he'd been biking for a couple of years. And she said, you know what? Took us 40 minutes this time, but I think we can do better. I think we can get this done. And because there's a certain hill in it, he literally got off the bike and scooched down on his bum. And it's a pretty small hill. So I think we can get it down. She worked with him for a couple of months, and she got him down to 12 minutes. And that was because she believed in him and she was willing to work on it, where that other swim coach was like not really willing to even try. But those cheerleaders in our lives also make all the difference. And so I think sometimes when we're maybe being hard on ourselves, or like, I can't do everything, there are other people who will step in and be that person in our kids' lives, and they make all the difference. And I think we all need help sometimes, and it'll come in lots of different forms. I've had it come in the form of peers out there in the world. Andy had a kid who was almost always in his class from church, who was, he was our plant. We made sure that he was always in his class to support him. We also have had paid staff over the years. These young guys right here in this picture, they helped him get his Scout merit badges. They did all of those things. So it wasn't all me doing it. We have, and I think it's important to kind of investigate what natural supports you have. In our family, we've got a pretty good family, and we've got a church family, and we've got lots of people who are in our lives, and they end up taking on some of those responsibilities alongside us. And then we also have a home and community-based support waiver now, and so we also have paid staff who do a lot. And sometimes people are like, oh, but isn't that kind of like paid friendships? But I would say, don't we all kind of end up becoming friends for the workers and the people that we work alongside? And these are friends from church who have ended up becoming some of his staff, but they're also like family, and we love them. So, and he has friends too through, that he's grown up with. He coaches lacrosse, and he's also got, a whole host of people who are in his life. And so we want to make sure that it's not just all us. We want to make sure we've got that bigger web of support. And really sharing our kids with others is a gift, not a favor. I think a lot of times we think we're asking off people like, oh, we want you to help us out with these different things, but really our kids make the world a better place because of who they are. And when we get other people involved in our lives to kind of spread the responsibility, it also spreads the love that they have to share. And a couple of examples of that. So Andy, when he was going into his senior year of high school, the lacrosse coach at the high school said, we'd love to have Andy come be part of the team. And I was like, is it lacrosse kind of a violent sport? And he said, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And I'm like, okay. So, and he's like, and I wanted to actually get out on the field and practice with us. And it ended up being such a great experience for him, but also such a great experience for those teammates that he had. So he got out there, and by about the fourth or fifth game, we noticed he was in the middle, and they said he was helping to toss the coin. We were like, well, what does that mean? And that means, well, he's one of the co-captains. I was like, is that okay? Like, how did that happen? They said, well, there's like 4 or 5 co-captains, and he told us he wanted to be one, so that's what he's doing. Like, okay. And then about a couple games later, we saw the kids in a huddle, and we heard them go, Woodstock, which is our high school name. Woodstock, Andy Meredith. And I was like, what are they saying down there? And then I finally realized at their awards banquet what was going on. And they said, okay, Andy, do your thing. And he was up on stage and he said, who's your team? He said, Woodstock. Who's gonna win? Woodstock. Who's your captain? Andy Meredith. And then he added a 4th thing that time, and he said, who's your coach? And they said, Andy Meredith. And that was the day he made himself a coach for the past 7 years. So, and these kids have benefited from him being in there. And I'll tell you, Andy Meredith only got about 2.5 minutes of game time that year, but it was the first year that they went to the Sweet 16. And I don't think Andy's point made that difference. But I think his presence did. Our kids make a difference where they are. And other people are blessed to have them there. And now that he's with these kids as their coach, he is their example. And he tells them not to cuss. He gets on to the other coaches when they do, and he keeps them on the sidelines, and he keeps a tight, he runs a tight ship. And I think that that's important too, to recognize that our kids have a lot to offer this world. And so this is a little, I don't know if this works, I don't think it does, but this is a little video of us. But I think, really as we're going through life, it's important to embrace the ordinary and have fun. As we have all these lists for ourselves, we also need to make sure that we're having a good time.
Did that sound?
I don't know. Oh, it does. I don't know if you can hear. That's us doing karaoke. We were in a good phase then. It was really fun. Set up the phones. But this is kind of my final kind of image I wanted to share with you all. And this is a photo that Andy took. He is a very talented photographer. And this is something we discovered just because we were giving him the camera, and he would take like when he was 8, he would take like 1,000 photos, and there maybe be a couple of good ones. And my brother-in-law, who's a photographer, gave us some advice on how to develop that talent with him. And he was like, print them out, hang them around his room. And we started doing that. And we entered him in those little PTA reflections contests. And he would do some of those things. And so we enforced this for him. And he got to where he's gotten where he's really good at it. And this is one that he took that, as I was going through the photos, I got kind of freaked out about, to be honest, because I thought that this was a pier with waves behind it. And I thought my husband had lost his mind. I was like, why would you do this? Andy could have died. He could have died. But then I realized it wasn't actually It wasn't waves at all. It was a mountain vista. And it's one that I did to a couple of times before, but I didn't recognize it. And it reminded me so much of life with our kids. And it's that, there are definitely hills and valleys, and there are areas of light and darkness, but it's a beautiful view and it's a beautiful life. And how much I appreciate that, that I've been able to adjust my vision of what the world looks like. That it's not this scary, overwhelming thing, but it's actually a beautiful life and a beautiful view. So that's kind of all that I have to share, but I would love to hear any questions you all. So thank you.
Do you have any questions? Anyone have any questions? Oh,
I would. Not way too much of me. So I was like you, I signed my daughter up for all the things, just did because she also can kind of present typically, especially at first. And then in the younger years, she could kind of pass, it was mostly like lots of physical play and all that. As she's gotten older, and I know some people in the room have had this experience too, kids are really kind when they can see that a child's very, has a lot going on, especially physically, or, you can tell appearance or whatever, yeah. But they are very unkind when it's like somewhere in the middle. It's like, I almost wish sometimes that she was a little more obviously disabled. Or, just people are very unkind. And so we've had the experience where we actually have to pull her away from all, like, she had a camp again this summer. And she was just totally crushed. They basically said she needs to go down again to the 5th grade camp because the pace, and we've had to have one-on-one, it's not sustainable. And we've been going there for years. They love Eliza. They've advocated for her. And she was crushed. She didn't want to go back. And this has happened a lot now that she's gotten older and with kids. So we're pulling her back into, like, at this point, she can only go to special needs camps, I think. We had an out of district placement because she's so isolated. She got depressed and saying things like, I don't want to live. And it was because of all that isolation, because we're so unforgiving. And yeah, so I don't know what really my question is, other than like, I want those experiences, but I find that I'm getting more scared as time goes on and pulling her out of society more. Like I want to believe in her to, keep up, but so, yeah.
And I think, nothing is a catch-all solution for any of us, right? So I know something that we've tried to do is in the past, as Andy's gotten older, there are less just inclusive opportunities because it's adult life, right? And so we definitely have tried to do a balance of doing, yes, some of these inclusive opportunities. And a lot of times we have to, and you're right, like Down syndrome is a pretty obvious one, right? Like people recognize that as a difference. But I also am the leader of girls 12 to 18 in our church congregation. And what I found helps too is when we're able to give the kids a little more explanation for why somebody acts some different. And when and if they do, so that then the kids have, and we give them the tools they have an idea about why that's happening. And we give them tools for how to handle it. And we've had to do that over the years too, where like our neighborhood kids would get so frustrated that Andy wasn't following the rules of the game or baseball or outside. And I was like, listen, if you tell him, run, he's just gonna run. Like, he doesn't know where you want him to run. You have to be specific and say, run to first base, run to the stick, whatever it is, right? And so I think, and we had that at camp this year too. We have a couple of kiddos who are autistic. And to be honest, their parents have sent them and not explained even to us as leaders. And also the kids don't have that, and the kids are sharing cabins together. And so I, as the leader, was like, okay, you need to recognize that this kiddo is neurodivergent. And also, these are some of the challenges, and these are some of the things that you can do. And so I do think giving kids the tools is helpful, but even still, there are gonna be, just like that swim coach said, there's gonna be kids and people who are jerks out there too. Or it's just not gonna happen because there's not like the gelling that we hope happens. And so I think that's where it's helpful too, to have the opportunities that are, you know, specifically for our kids. So like Andy's gonna be doing this, so he does like Special Olympics kayaking, and he's doing a day program where they're doing field trips. So he's got his friends with disabilities, and he also has these other friends that are based on mutual shared interest. But it's, yeah, it's a delicate road that we walk. And I think too, when we do end up pulling them out, or we do end up needing to give them additional tools, I think we try the least restrictive setting. But if we have to pull back, that's okay. That's okay too. Like, there's no shame in that. Same thing with school. I think a lot of times we get a lot of encouragement for inclusion, and we chose that in many instances, but in some instances, it was like reading and math absolutely had to be small group. Like, that's okay. There's no shame in that. We have to make the decisions that are best for our kids and for our families, and not feel like we have to justify that to anybody.
Any other questions? And I think it's interesting you're talking about like Andy having supports like at church. Andy was Braden's support at church. For years, he was like Braden's support. He took care of Braden every Sunday.
And I think that's the thing too, is some, like Andy's support staff now is actually, not just, one of them is an autistic person.